In the winter of 1903, an archivist named Samuel Breck was cataloging a collection of unclaimed papers at the New York City Hall of Records, the kind of routine administrative work that produces nothing of consequence for years at a stretch, when he found, folded inside a bundle of 1871 municipal land survey filings, a set of architectural drawings that did not belong there. They had been misfiled, or placed there deliberately, or had arrived by a chain of custody that the surrounding documents gave no clue to. There were 11 sheets in total. Each measured approximately 24 by 36 inches. They were drawn in ink on linen, not paper, linen, the medium used for documents intended to survive decades of handling. The draftsmanship was precise. The linework was the work of someone trained at a high level, using instruments rather than freehand. Breck was not an architect. He was an archivist. But he had spent 19 years handling documents, and he could read a floor plan. What he was looking at, across 11 sheets, was a building, a very large building. The ground plan on the first sheet showed a footprint that Breck measured against the scale bar in the lower right corner and calculated at approximately 900 feet in length and 400 feet in width. That is larger than any structure he had ever seen in any document he had ever processed. That is larger than the United States Capitol building. The elevation drawings on sheets 4 through 7 showed a fade of an order and complexity, column spacing, cornice detail, window rhythm that belonged, in his experience of historical documents, to the architecture of the 17th or 18th century, not the 19th. The detailed drawings on the final 3 sheets showed structural elements whose scale suggested wall thicknesses and foundation depths inconsistent with any building technique he could identify from any construction work he had seen in his career. He set the drawings aside and continued his cataloging. He came back to them at the end of the day. He measured the footprint again. He got the same number. He took the drawings home that evening, a violation of archive procedure he had never committed before in 19 years, wrapped them in oilcloth, and placed them in the cedar chest at the foot of his bed. He returned them the following morning. He filed them in the land survey bundle where he had found them. He told no one. He wrote down what he had found in a private memorandum that evening, at home, with dimensions and a description of each of the 11 sheets. He sealed the memorandum in an envelope and placed it in the cedar chest. He did not return to the Hall of Records bundle. He did not submit a finding report. He did not discuss the drawings with any colleague. His memorandum remained in the cedar chest until his granddaughter found it in 1961, 58 years after it was written. The official record of the New York City Hall of Records holdings for the period of Breck's employment is held at the New York City Municipal Archives. The 1871 land survey bundle from which Breck took the drawings is catalogued. Its contents are listed. The catalog entry for the bundle does not include 11 architectural drawings. It lists 43 land survey documents. No architectural drawings. Either the drawings were never in the bundle when it was cataloged, meaning Breck found them before cataloging, and the catalog was made from the remainder, or they were removed from the bundle after his cataloging visit and the entry was revised. The archive's accession log for the bundle shows a single revision entry dated 1904, 1 year after Breck's cataloging work. The nature of the revision is described in the log as administrative correction. No further detail. The person who made the correction is identified by an initial only, R. The archive has no record of a staff member with that initial working in the relevant department in 1904. Before we go further, if buried investigations like this are something you want more of, hit subscribe so the next one finds you when it drops. The algorithm tends to suppress this kind of research unless you tell it you want it. To understand what a set of architectural drawings showing a 900-foot building with 17th century proportions means in a New York Land Survey bundle from 1871, you have to understand the nature of architectural drawings themselves as historical documents. An architectural drawing is not a description of something imagined. It is a working document. It is produced for the purpose of constructing something that exists in 3 dimensions. A set of 11 sheets, ground plan, elevations, sections, detailed drawings, all in the same hand, all at consistent scale, all drawn on linen for durability, represents a commission. Someone hired a draughtsman or a team of draughtsmen to produce a construction document package for a building. That building either was built, was being built, or was formally intended to be built. You do not commission 11 sheets of linen architectural drawings at that level of precision and detail for a fantasy. You commission them because you need a contractor to read them. The question that Breck's memorandum raises, the question that is sitting in a cedar chest turned granddaughter's keepsake box in 1961, is not whether a building this size could have existed somewhere in the record. The question is which building these drawings were produced for, because a structure 900 feet long, with the proportions and detailing of 17th century European civic architecture, if it was built anywhere near New York in the period those drawings suggest, should be in every history of American architecture ever written. It is in none, and the absence from the record of a building that size, not the loss of the building, which might be explained by demolition, but the loss of any reference to its having existed, is the question that Breck understood when he measured the scale bar a second time and got the same number. Breck's granddaughter was a librarian named Ruth Cassidy. She found the sealed envelope in 1961 when she was clearing the cedar chest after it came to her as part of Breck's estate. She read the memorandum. She was a librarian. She understood immediately what she was reading. She contacted the New York City Municipal Archives. The archives sent a researcher to examine the memorandum. The researcher spent 2 hours with it, took notes, and told Cassidy that the memorandum described a document find that had not been formally reported, and that the relevant bundle would need to be re-examined to determine whether the drawings were still present. The bundle was re-examined. The drawings were not in it. The researcher informed Cassidy that, without the physical drawings, the memorandum was a historical curiosity but not an actionable archival finding. Cassidy asked whether the 1904 revision entry and the unidentified initial R were not themselves significant. The researcher told her those details would need to be investigated through a formal research request. Cassidy submitted a formal research request. She received a letter 2 months later informing her that the 1904 revision entry had been reviewed and determined to be a routine administrative correction with no connection to any specific document. The letter did not explain how this determination had been made or who had made it, given that the corrector was identified only by a single initial, and no staff record existed for that initial in the department. Cassidy kept the memorandum. She submitted it to the New York Historical Society in 1969. The Society acknowledged receipt and noted it in their accession records. It has not been published or exhibited. This connects to a second document, not from New York but from London, and not from 1903 but from 40 years earlier. In 1861, a draftsman named Clement Ashby was employed at a London architectural firm called Thorpe and Renwick, which had been operating since 1834 and whose commission records show steady work in civic and commercial building design across the Victorian period. Ashby kept a personal sketchbook, standard practice for draftsmen of the era, used for study, for recording interesting details, for notes on commissions in progress. His sketchbook for 1861 is in the collection of the Royal Institute of British Architects, donated by his family in 1924. It is accessible, and in 4 pages of that sketchbook, dated by Ashby to the autumn of 1861, are sketches that Ashby himself labels as copies, meaning he was reproducing, at reduced scale and in sketch form, details from a source document he was looking at. The source he was copying from is identified in his marginal note as the Hartley set. 2 words. The Hartley set. Ashby sketched 4 details from it: a cornice profile, a window surround, a column base, and what appears to be a section through a foundation system showing a wall thickness he annotates at 36 feet. 36 feet of wall. That is not a wall, that is a fortification. Or it is the base of a structure so tall that its wall thickness at foundation level is 36 feet. The Hartley set has never been identified. The name Hartley does not appear in Thorpe and Renwick's surviving commission records, which are also at the RIBA and cover the full period of the firm's operation. No architectural drawing set associated with any client named Hartley in any London firm of the period has been identified in any archive. Ashby's 4 pages of sketches are the only record that the Hartley set ever existed. 3 researchers have looked at those 4 pages in the RIBA's accession records since the sketchbook was donated in 1924. None of them has published anything about what they found. A 3rd thread connects to Boston and to a date considerably earlier than either Breck or Ashby. In 1798, a land surveyor named Josiah Plimpton was hired by a private land company to survey a parcel of approximately 600 acres on the south shore of the Charles River, west of the city. His survey map, a large format document, approximately 3 feet by 2 feet, drawn with the precision standard for professional land surveys of the federal period, is in the collection of the Massachusetts Historical Society. It has been there since 1841, when Plimpton's estate donated his professional papers. The map has been studied by historians of early Boston land development for the specific detail of lot boundaries and ownership lines it shows. What those historians have not, in the published literature, addressed is a feature of the map that is visible to anyone who looks at the full document rather than the lot boundary detail. In the lower left corner of the survey area, Plimpton has marked a series of lines that do not correspond to any lot boundary, drainage feature, or topographical element that a standard land survey would record. The lines form a rectangular outline, approximately 800 feet long and 350 feet wide, annotated in Plimpton's hand with a single phrase: existing foundations, origin not determined. Existing foundations, not proposed construction, not recorded structure, existing foundations whose origin he could not determine. In 1798, on a parcel of land that had been in English colonial hands since the 1630s, and that the colonial record describes as undeveloped agricultural land for its entire documented history. The foundations Plimpton mapped predate the colonial record of that land. They are on a survey that has been sitting in the Massachusetts Historical Society for 183 years. The phrase existing foundations, origin not determined, appears in its lower left corner and has not been addressed in any published account of the survey or the land it depicts. Philadelphia, 1887. A demolition crew clearing a site for a new commercial building finds, beneath the foundations of the structure they are demolishing, stone-carved architectural fragments, sections of column shaft, portions of carved entablature, a complete capital that the contractor's foreman, who has seen classical revival architecture across 30 years of Philadelphia building work, describes in his job log as unlike any column capital in this city. The fragments are too large to move easily. A city engineer examines the site. He classifies the fragments as colonial-era decorative stonework, salvage value only. They are broken up and carted as rubble fill. The report and the classification are in the Philadelphia City Archives. The fragments are beneath a pavement resurfaced 4 times since 1887. Washington, D.C., 1901, a contractor excavating for new foundations beneath the Treasury Building Annex finds, at a depth of 14 feet, a section of dressed stone floor extending beyond the excavation boundary in 3 directions. The stone is a type not quarried anywhere in the mid-Atlantic region. The contractor's foreman notes this specifically because sourcing the stone's origin would have been straightforward for a man in his profession, and he cannot do it. The floor section is photographed. The photographs are submitted to the Treasury Department's supervising architect, along with the contractor's report. The Treasury Department's response, filed in the National Archives, instructs the contractor to document the feature, proceed with foundation work, and submit the photographs under a reference number assigned to a file classified as Internal Engineering Correspondence. The photographs are in that classified file today. The file has not been opened for public access review since its creation. This is not coincidence. This is a pattern. The New York City Municipal Archives has never adequately explained why a 1904 revision entry in the accession log of a bundle that contained, by a credentialed archivist's sworn memorandum, 11 architectural drawings of a 900-foot building, was made by a person identified only by a single initial, for which no staff record exists, and why a formal research inquiry into that entry produced a determination of routine correction without any explanation of how that determination was reached. The Royal Institute of British Architects has never explained why Clement Ashby's 4 pages of sketches from a source document he labeled the Hartley set, a set showing a foundation wall thickness of 36 feet, have been in their collection for 100 years without producing a single published inquiry into what the Hartley set was and where it came from. The Massachusetts Historical Society has never explained why Josiah Plimpton's 1798 survey notation reading existing foundations, origin not determined, marking a rectangular outline 800 feet long on land the colonial record describes as undeveloped, has been accessible to historians of early Boston for 183 years without generating a single published investigation into what those foundations were the foundations of. Why would an archivist with a 19-year record of professional compliance take architectural drawings home in violation of procedure, return them the following morning, file them where he found them, and write a sealed memorandum about them that he told no one about for the rest of his life? Unless what he had measured on those drawings was something he understood could not safely be reported through normal channels, why would a draftsman making copies in his personal sketchbook from a source document annotate a foundation wall section at 36 feet without remarking on it, as though 36 feet were a dimension he had encountered before, as though the Hartley set were a document he had seen enough of to treat its proportions as ordinary? Why would a land surveyor in 1798 mark foundations on a survey of land described as undeveloped, annotate them as existing, note that he could not determine their origin, and file the map with that annotation in place rather than simply omitting features he could not classify? Which is what surveyors of his era routinely did with anomalous findings. The honest answer is that we do not know what building the 11 sheets described, or what the Hartley set was for, or who built the foundations that Plimpton mapped in 1798 on land the colonial record describes as undeveloped. What we know is that a 900-foot building drawn on linen at high professional precision with 17th-century proportions was in a New York archive and was removed within a year of being found, the corrector leaving only an initial. What we know is that a 36-foot foundation wall was considered ordinary enough to sketch without remark by a man who copied architectural details for a living. What we know is that existing foundations of indeterminate origin have been sitting in a Boston Society archive under that annotation for nearly 2 centuries, without anyone in the published literature asking what they were the foundations of. That question was available to every historian who looked at that map. None of them asked it. And that silence, not the documents themselves, but the silence around them, is the most precise record we have of something that someone decided at each stage and in each city should not become a question requiring an answer. Samuel Breck died in 1921. His memorandum is at the New York Historical Society. The 11 drawings, if they still exist, are in a collection that has not surfaced in any public record since the 1904 correction entry. Josiah Plimpton's survey is in Boston, with its lower left corner notation still legible after 225 years. The foundations he mapped are underground that has been built on, built over, and built on again since 1798. They are deeper now than they were when he walked over them with his chain and his compass and wrote down, in the careful hand of a man who recorded what he saw, that something was there and that he did not know what it was. The official history of American and European architectural heritage tells us that the buildings of the pre-modern period are documented, their origins known, their scales accounted for in the survey and archaeological record. What Breck's sealed memorandum, Ashby's sketchbook, Plimpton's survey notation, and the classified Treasury Department photographs tell us is that there are blueprints, literal and figurative, for a history of construction on both sides of the Atlantic that does not fit inside the official timeline. Not one blueprint, a pattern of them. In archives, in sketchbooks, in lower left corners of land survey maps, in files marked internal engineering correspondence. Waiting, in the way that documents wait, for the researcher who asks the question that the document was placed there to answer. Subscribe and share this with someone who still asks what came before the record says anything was there. History does not disappear when it is buried. It disappears when the last archivist who measured the scale bar twice takes his memorandum home and seals it in an envelope and tells no one. Next week, I am following the Hartley set into a third archive, a commission record at the Guildhall Library in London that lists a payment in 1858 to a firm called Hartley & Sons, surveyors, for services described only as the completion of the prior work. Prior work. No project named, no location given. An address in Clerkenwell that no longer exists. You will not want to miss it.